All right, so this is my week two NBA power rankings. The NBA power rankings are going to be looking a little different than the NFL power rankings because, there's more than 16 games I got to talk about. It's probably closer to about 50 games I got to talk about. So I'm not going to go into depth with each game, because I don't want to make an hour long video, and you guys probably don't want to listen to an hour long video. But, you know, let's get started. Number 30, got the Houston Rockets. So they went 0-3 this week, which dropped them 5 spots from number 25 down to number 30. This week, Rockets, they lost by 30 points to the Magic. They lost by 4 points to the Spurs, and they lost by 11 points to the Warriors. So, outside of that first game versus the Magic, the other two games weren't necessarily bad. You know, Close loss to the Spurs is good. 11-point loss to the Warriors isn't bad considering, the Warriors are substantially a better team, but, still went 0-3 and they still did get blown out by the Magic, which, does not look good for their resume. Number 29, I got the Charlotte Hornets, who went 1-2 this week. They actually moved up 1 spot, because they did, unlike the Rockets, they actually won a game this week. They won their first game without Cody Martin. They've been without Cody Martin all week. They beat the Hawks by 6, and they did lose to the Pistons by 12, and they did lose to the Nets without Nicholas Claxton or Cam Johnson. They still lost to the Nets by 12. So they looked good in the first game, but next two games did not look good. Number 28 got the Spurs. Went 1-2 this week, dropping 2 spots from number 26. So, they lost to the Mavericks in game 1 by 7 points. The Mavericks were missing Dwight Powell in that game. So, they did beat the Rockets by 4 points, but, like I said already, the Rockets, aren't exactly a good team right now. So, it's not saying much that they beat the Rockets. And then their last game, they just lost by 40 points to the Clippers without Terrence Mann. So, 40-point blowout loss is, never looks good. Number 27, got the Portland Trail Blazers. So they stayed at number 27 after going 1-3 this week. So they lost their first game by 12 to the Clippers without Terrence Mann. They lost. Anthony Simons got hurt after that game, so he didn't play the rest of the week. And he's supposed to be out for about 4 to 6 more weeks. So that's obviously, takes a hit to the roster. So without Anthony Simons, they lost to the Magic by 5. They lost to the 76ers without James Harden, of course. They lost to them by 32 points, so that does not look good either. And then they lost to the Raptors without Precious Achiuwa. They beat the Raptors. Yeah. They beat the Raptors without Anthony Simons and without Robert Williams. And the Raptors were without Precious Achiuwa, and they still beat the Raptors by 8 points. So that was a good win for them. Number 26 is the Raptors now. Went 1-3 this week, dropping them 4 spots from number 22. So the Raptors this week started off with a win versus the Timberwolves by 3. Timberwolves were without Jaden McDaniels, though. So I'm thinking if McDaniels did play, the Raptors probably would have lost that game. They lost to the Bulls by 1 point, which, isn't bad because it's, 1 point game. So that's good. They lost to the 76ers only by 7 points without OG Anunoby. So that's pretty solid to lose to the Sixers. Obviously the Sixers still without James Harden, but Raptors without one of their better players as well. They lost by 7. And they did lose to the Blazers without Precious Achiuwa, but the Blazers were missing Anthony Simons and Robert Williams, which are 2 of the better players on the team right now, and you still end up losing to them by 8 points. So, yeah, that's why they're going down a few spots here. Number 25, I got the Wizards. They went 1-2 this week. Jumped up 3 spots from being number 28. They lost first game of the season. They lost by 23 to the Pacers. Obviously, it doesn't look great losing by 23 points. Second game of the season, they did beat the Grizzlies by 7. Grizzlies were missing Luke Kennard, but Luke Kennard isn't too big of a piece there. And then, they did lose to the Knicks by 19 points. They were missing, or not the Knicks, the Celtics. Also the Celtics by 19 points. They were missing Daniel Gafford in that game, but, probably still would have lost with him, but Celtics are a pretty good team, so can't be too upset about that. Next up, we got the Grizzlies at 24. They dropped 10 spots from being number 14 after starting the season 0-4. So obviously, 0-4 start is not ideal. They have been missing Jose Alvarado all week, which was not expected. But yeah, they lost by 7 versus the Pelicans, who are missing Alvarado. That's what I meant to say. They lost to the Pelicans without Jose Alvarado by 7. They lost to the Nuggets. Luke Kennard got a concussion in the first game, so he hasn't been playing the next couple games. But they lost to the Nuggets only by 4 without Luke Kennard, so that's pretty solid there. They lost to the Wizards by 7 without Luke Kennard. So maybe if Luke Kennard plays in both of those games against the Nuggets and Wizards, maybe they win those. I don't know. But they did lose to the Mavs by 15 when the Mavs were missing Kyrie Irving. So I thought they could win that game because the Mavericks were without Kyrie Irving, but they still couldn't figure out a way to shut Luka down enough. So yeah, and starting 0-4, they're going to be dropping 10 spots. Number 23 got the Detroit Pistons jumping up 6 spots from number 29 after they started the season 2-2. Better than I thought they would start out. In game 1, they only lost to the Heat by 1 point, so very easily could be 3-1 right now. They did beat the Hornets in the next game by 12 when the Hornets were missing Cody Martin, who's a solid rotational piece, but I think Pistons still win that game if he's playing. The third game against the Bulls, they beat them by 16 points. And then they did end up losing to the Thunder by 12 points in the game after that. And we have a couple injuries here. Bojan Bogdanovic and Monte Morris and Isaiah Livers, they have not played at all this week. And Bojan and Isaiah Livers are supposed to miss 3 more weeks, and Monte Morris is supposed to miss 2 more weeks. So those are definitely at least Bogdanovic and Monte Morris are definitely rotational guys. Bogdanovic is one of the better players on their team, but they're still doing pretty solid without them right now. So I'm still going to be moving them up 6 spots here. Number 22, I got the Utah Jazz dropping 1 spot after going 1-3 to start the season. I'll go find them here. Jazz this week, first game of the season, they lost to the Kings, who were missing Trey Lyles, and they lost to them by 16 points, so not great there. They did end up beating the Clippers by 2 in the next game. Clippers were missing Terrence Mann, so they probably would have won with Terrence Mann, but still a solid win over a mostly healthy Clippers team. It's pretty good. And they did end up losing by 22 points versus the Suns, who were missing Devin Booker and Bradley Beal and Damian Lee, so kind of tough there to be losing, to getting blown out by 20-plus points when the second best player is Jusuf Nurkic on that team. So, yeah, but they ended up only losing to the Nuggets by 8 points. So they got blown out by Devin Booker and Bradley Beal's Suns, but kept a close game versus a fully healthy Nuggets team. So, NBA is just crazy like that. Number 21, I got the Chicago Bulls, jumping up 2 spots after starting the season 2-2. They started off with a rough 20-point loss versus the Thunder, and then they got back on track with a 1-point win versus the Raptors in the next game. Then they did end up losing the game after that. They lost by 16 versus the Pistons. So, just up and down season to start. And then the fourth game, they did end up winning by 7 versus the Indiana Pacers. So, 2 good games and 2 bad games for the Bulls. But that's basically what I projected for them to happen. I project the Bulls to be mid-team, maybe getting about the 41 win. On a good season, I think they get the 41 wins. Number 20, you got the Brooklyn Nets dropping 2 spots from number um, 18 down to number 20 after starting the season off 1-2. So the Nets, to start the season, they lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers by 1 point in the opening game. So, that's a pretty good game, I would say, because I think the Cavs are a substantially better team than them, and only losing by 1 is pretty solid. Second game, they only lost by 5 to the Dallas Mavericks when they were missing Cam Johnson and Nicholas Claxton. So, if both of those guys are playing, they probably win that game too. And then they did win their third game versus the Charlotte Hornets. They beat them by 12 without Cam Johnson and Nicholas Claxton again. And Nick Claxton is supposed to be missing Wednesday's game, and Cam Johnson is supposed to be injured for about the next week and a half, about 10 or so days. So obviously, without Cam Johnson for about next 3 to 4 games, they're going to be having to fight more for those wins. But they're not doing a horrible job so far. Minnesota Timberwolves next at number 19 dropped 4 spots from being number 15 after starting the season 1-2. So they did lose their first game versus the Raptors. They were missing Jaden McDaniels, and they only lost by 3. So with McDaniels, I think they win that game. Next game, they were still without McDaniels, but they did beat the Heat by 16 points. But the Heat also were missing Jimmy Butler and Kevin Love. So if all those players are healthy, I think the Heat probably win that game with Jimmy Butler in there. In this next game, they did lose to the Hawks by 14 with Jaden McDaniels back playing that game. So really no excuses, at least to not keep that game closer than it was. So that's why they're going to be dropping 4 spots here. Number 18, got the Indiana Pacers jumping up 2 spots for number 20 to number 18 after starting the season off 2-1. So for the Indiana Pacers this week, they started off with a 23-point win over the Washington Wizards. That's pretty good, I would say. They beat the Cavs by 12 points, but the Cavs didn't really play anybody. They were without Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and Donovan Mitchell that game. So, you should be winning that game if their best 3 players are going to be missing the game. And then they ended up losing by 7 to the Chicago Bulls. So, the record's 2-1. But they lost. They lost to the Bulls, and they only beat the Cavs by 12 points, missing their 3 best players. So definitely, I feel like their record makes them look better than they are, even though it's literally only 3 games into the season. But I'm not sure if they played the best 3 games. Their offense has looked really good through 3 games, but defense, not so much. They let Karis LeVert and Evan Mobley both drop 30-plus points on them in the game versus the Cavs. So you got to do better than that. Number 17, I got the New York Knicks dropping 5 spots from number 12 all the way down to 17 after starting the season off 1-2. They started off with a 4-point loss versus the Celtics. So pretty solid game there, I would say. Then they followed that up with a 6-point win over the Hawks, which is pretty good. Then they lost by 9 to the Pelicans, who are missing Jose Alvarado. Not a bad week for them, but he only put up 87 points against the Pelicans. That's not good. You got to put up more than 87 points in a game. But yeah, starting season off 1-2, dropping 5 spots. Number 16, I got the Orlando Magic jumping up 8 spots from number 24 all the way up to number 16. After starting the season off 2-1, they very easily could have started this off 3-0. They started the season with a 30-point win over the Rockets. Pretty good game. They beat the Blazers by 5. They were missing Anthony Simons that game, but, a win's a win. Then they did end up losing to the Lakers by 3 points. Lakers were missing Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt, so if those guys played, Lakers probably won by more than 3 points. But, Magic were still in this game to the very end. Yeah. Next up is the Atlanta Hawks, jumping up 4 spots from 19 all the way up to 15. They had a good week this week. They started off with a 6-point loss to the Hornets. Not a great game there. Started off with a 6-point loss to the Knicks. Pretty close game, but still a loss. But then they followed up with 2 two good wins after that. They beat the Bucks by 17 points. They were without Chris Middleton, but they still made Damian Lillard not look very good in that game. So they still beat Giannis and Dame by 17 points. That's still really good. And then they beat the Minnesota Timberwolves by 14 points too. So started the season off 0-2. In the next two games, they turned it around. The Kings at 14, dropping 3 spots, starting off the season 2-1. So for the Kings, they started off with a 16-point win versus the Jags, and they've been without Trey Lyles, for those first couple games. So yeah, they beat the Jazz by 16. Then they played the Warriors and did lose to the Warriors by 8 points. Then they beat the Lakers by 5 points in overtime. So the Lakers were without Jared Vanderbilt, but Kings were without Trey Lyles, so it kind of cancels it out a little bit. I think that the reason why they're moving down is because De'Aaron Fox got an ankle injury. They said he's supposed to be out at least Wednesday. They don't have a definitive timeline on there, but probably out for at least a few games. Probably won't be seeing him until next week at the earliest, but he's for sure out for Wednesday. Number 13 are the Pelicans, jumping up 4 spots from number 17 after starting the season off 2-1. For the Pelicans, they started off with a 7-point win versus the Grizzlies without Jose Alvarado, who hasn't played all week yet. Then they beat the Knicks the next game by 9 points. Pretty solid game there. Then they did end up losing to the Warriors by 28 points, but they were also without Brandon Ingram that game. Warriors were without Clay and Jonathan Kuminga, but Pelicans also without Brandon Ingram. So probably should have prepped a closer game considering the Warriors also were out without 2 of their better players, but not can't be too disappointed in them. Also, Jose Alvarado is supposed to be out for 1 more week, and Najee Marshall is supposed to be out for 2 more weeks. So, got some early injury issues for the Pelicans there. Number 12, got the Miami Heat, dropping 3 spots after starting the season off with 1-3. You might think the starting the season off 1-3, they should be dropping a little more than 3 spots, but we'll get into that. They beat the Pistons by 1 point, so they should have beat the Pistons by more than 1 point, right? You would think. But then they only lost to the Celtics by 8 points when they were missing Caleb Martin, who's a pretty solid rotational piece. So not a horrible loss there. Then they played the Timberwolves, but they were without Jimmy Butler and Kevin Love. So they only lost by 16 points without their best player. So you can't be too upset there because obviously missing your best player, not expecting to win a lot of games. In the next game, they had Jimmy Butler back, but they were without Bam Adebayo and Caleb Martin still, and they lost to the Bucks by 8. So losing to the Bucks without your second best player by 8 points, I'd say it's pretty solid. Losing to the Celtics by 8 points, it's pretty solid. And then Timberwolves, obviously they were without their best player, so it's going to be hard to win games. As long as Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo are playing, they should win games. So I got the Lakers dropping 6 spots from 5 all the way down to 11. So obviously, starting the season off 2-2. The 12-point loss to the Nuggets in the first game. The Lakers were missing Jared Vanderbilt, who hasn't played all week, but I don't think that makes up for a 12-point loss there. Next game, they beat the Suns by 5, but the Suns were without Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, so you should beat them by more than 5 points, right? Then they lost to the Kings by 5. Kings were without Trey Lyles, Lakers without Vanderbilt, so evens it out there, basically. Next game, they barely beat the Orlando Magic. They were without Vanderbilt and Rui Hachimura that game, so I guess they get a little more slack there because they were also without Hachimura. But I think they should still be beating the Magic for more than 3 points. They've been trying to put LeBron James on a minute restriction, but it hasn't worked out too well because when they get in close games, LeBron just plays the whole fourth quarter because he feels like he has to, or else they're not winning the game. Which is probably accurate because they're plus minus whatever when LeBron is off the court is just horrible. Um, so also Jared Vanderbilt hasn't played all week, and he's supposed to be out for 10 more days. So it's probably about three to four more games, depending how their schedule looks out. So, obviously he's slated to be one of their starters. So obviously missing him is going to be a bit of a hit. Number 10 is the Cleveland Cavaliers, dropping 2 spots after starting the season off 1-2. Cavs have not been particularly healthy this year either already. Started off with a 1-point win over the Nets. Feel like they should be beating the Nets by more than 1 point, considering they were healthy that game. But in the second game, they were missing Darius Garland and Jared Allen and only lost to the Thunder by 3. So, obviously, I think that if they have Jared Allen and Darius Garland, I think that makes up for the 3-point deficit, and they would probably win that game. In the next game after that, they played the Pacers without Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and Donovan Mitchell, and lost by 12. So I think if all three of those players play, that they win that game. I don't know. They're all minor injuries, but they'll still be missing a couple games, which is obviously not going to help. And Darius Garland and Jared Allen are supposed to be out for Tuesday's game, so probably won't win that game either. They just got to get all three of those stars to be healthy and playing together, and they're going to be winning games. Number 9, I got the Thunder jumping up 4 spots after starting the season 3-1. Started with a 20-point win versus the Chicago Bulls. Then the 3-point win versus the Cavs that we just talked about when they were missing Garland and Allen. Should win that game by more than 3 without those guys playing, but, win's a win. They did get blown out by the Denver Nuggets by 33 points. But they followed it up versus a 12-point win versus the Pistons, who were missing Bojan Bogdanovic and Monte Morris. So, maybe if those guys are playing, maybe they do end up winning that game. But actually, the Thunder had a pretty solid week and moving up 4 spots. Number 8, I got the Warriors. They dropped 2 spots, even though they started 3-1, which is a pretty solid record. But still dropped them 4 spots or 2 spots here. It opened up with a 4-point loss to the Suns when the Suns were without Bradley Beal and the Warriors were without Draymond Green. So they lost by 4. Not a bad start there. They beat the Kings. They beat the Kings by 8 points without Draymond Green playing, so that's pretty good there. They beat the Rockets by 11 with Draymond Green back. So with their fully healthy game, they only beat the Rockets by 11 points. I think they should beat them by more. But after that, they still beat the Pelicans by 28 points despite missing Klay Thompson and Jonathan Kuminga. The Pelicans were also without Jose Alvarado and Brandon Ingram, so the teams are both missing a star player. So the Warriors still blew them out with them both missing a star player. So pretty solid game there. Here we got the Bucks at number 7, dropping 5 spots from number 2. Bucks did not play great this week. Don't expect Giannis and Dame to have all their chemistry stuff worked out, and just got some streaky shooter to start the year. But they only beat the Sixers to opening night by 1 point, despite them missing James Harden. So, you expect them to beat them by more than 1 when they're missing the second best player. Then they lost. They did miss Chris Middleton for the second game, but they still lost to the Hawks by 17 points, and Damian Lillard did not play good in that game at all. And then they beat the Heat by 8 points with a fully healthy Bucks team. They beat the Bam Adebayo-less Heat only by 8 points, so I think they should have been more than 8. I think obviously missing your second best player for the Heat, I feel like Bucks should have taken advantage of that and won by more than 8 points, but whatever. Number 6 are the Mavericks, moving up 10 spots after starting the season off 3-0. Luka's just played absolutely amazing. Game 1, they were without Dwight Powell, and they beat the Spurs by 7, so pretty solid game there. Next game, they beat the Nets without Cam Johnson and Nicholas Claxton. They only beat them by 5, so I think if those guys are playing, they probably lose that game, but Luka had a 49 points in that game, I believe, or something crazy like that. The next game after that, they were missing Kyrie Irving. They still beat the Grizzlies by 15 points. So Luka's been carrying them so far. If he continues to do that, obviously, then they're going to be winning a lot of their games. So Yeah, number 5 here, we got the 76ers jumping up 5 spots from number 10 to number 5. Part of the reason they did jump up is because they figured out something with the James Harden. Obviously, they got a trade done. I think I think their roster is better if they have James Harden on the team. But for chemistry purposes, it's probably better to trade him. And they did get valuable depth pieces in this trade. So let me just look at what we got going here for them. So for the 76ers, yeah, they traded away James Harden and PJ Tucker. They got Robert Covington, Nick Batum, Kenyon Martin, and Marcus Morris. So they got 4 good depth pieces for this team, and they traded away PJ Tucker. They replaced his depth piece specifically by Nick Batum, I guess you could say. And they traded James Harden, hasn't even played yet, obviously, for 3 good depth pieces still. So I think it's a solid move for the Sixers. I would have liked them to get Norman Powell or Terrence Mann or Bones Highland at least to get some sort of actual asset, but they definitely got depth for this team, which isn't a bad thing. But yeah, for the Sixers games this week, they lost to the Bucks by 1 opening night without James Harden. So, obviously if they had James Harden, let's go back. Sorry. If they have James Harden or, these other 4 guys that they got for that trade, I think they probably won that game. They beat the Raptors by 7, who are missing OG Anunoby. So if OG plays that game, Raptors probably win. But if the Sixers had James Harden or these other 4 players, they would still win that game. And they did beat the Blazers by 28 points, who are missing Anthony Simons. But Anthony Simons doesn't make up for a 28-point deficit. So solid week for the Sixers, and I'm glad to see we have a James Harden deal done. And that leads me on to number 4, who is the Clippers. We jumped up 3 spots after obviously acquiring James Harden. So they started the season with a 12-point win, missing Terrence Mann. They still beat the Blazers by 12, so solid W there. Second game versus the Jazz, they were also missing Terrence Mann. They lost by 2 points to the Jazz. If Terrence Mann plays, they'd probably win that game. But I think he should still be beating the Jazz by more than 2 points without Terrence Mann anyway. So they did end up beating the Spurs by 40 points without Terrence Mann, so that's pretty solid. Terrence Mann is also supposed to miss Tuesday's game. And then, of course, we have the James Harden trade, where they traded 4 rotational pieces in Robert Covington, Marcus Morris, Nick Batum, and Kenyon Martin for James Harden and PJ Tucker. So the new lineup here we got for the Clippers would be Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Ivica Zubac as the first 5. And on the bench you got Bones Highland, Norman Powell, Nick Batum, Robert Covington, and PJ Tucker. So wait, not what did I just say? No, never mind. Scratch that. Nick Batum. No, not Nick Batum. Bones Highland, Norman Powell, Terrence Mann, PJ Tucker, and Mason Plumlee. Yeah, that's their 10. That's their 10 guys right there. Pretty solid 10 lineup right there. Number 3, you got the Suns jumping up 1 spot for number 4, being 2-1. Solid start for the Suns. Let's go back to here. They beat the Warriors in opening game without Bradley Beal. Warriors were without Draymond, but Suns still without Bradley Beal. So beat them by 4, solid win there. They only lost to the Lakers by 5 without Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. So if those guys play, Suns are winning that game for sure. And they ended up beating the Jazz by 22 points without Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. So, a solid week for the Suns. You would like to see Booker and Beal be playing, obviously. Bradley Beal has yet to play, and he's supposed to miss Tuesday's game as well. Devin Booker is supposed to play Tuesday, so hopefully he does. Hopefully we see Bradley Beal play soon so we can actually look what that roster looks like. Number 2, I got the Celtics starting 3-0. Moving up 1 spot for number 2. Obviously 3-0, have a good start. They beat the Knicks by 4 in opening night. Solid W there. Beat the Heat by 8. Heat were missing Caleb Martin, but I'm not sure if Caleb Martin makes up an 8-point difference. Then they ended up beating the Wizards by 19 points when the Wizards were missing Daniel Gafford. So Kristaps Porzingis has looked really solid for them so far. Drew Holiday, um, his offensive impact is not evident completely, but he was never here for his offensive impact in the first place. Kristaps Porzingis' offensive impact is clearly threat, and we saw that primarily in the first game versus New York. So Celtics are looking like the favorite in the East right now. And then number one, we still got the Denver Nuggets starting the season off 4-0. Started with a 12-point win versus the Lakers, who were missing Jared Vanderbilt, but I don't think Vanderbilt makes up for a 12-point difference. They beat the Grizzlies without Luke Kennard by 4. That was not a great game. You should be beating the Grizzlies by more than 4, considering they were without Luke Kennard and obviously without John Morant and Brandon Clark too. So would like to see them win that game by more than 4 points. But they followed that up with a 32 or 33-point W over the Oklahoma City Thunder. So that's a really solid win there. And then an 8-point win over the Jazz. So he had no reasons to move this team down because obviously they're undefeated. So, still been playing really, really good for the Nuggets this year. I'm actually going to talk about our top performers versus this week. So for this week, our top performers here, we got Nikola Jokic having a 29-point, 11 assists, 13 rebound game in opening night against the Lakers. So that was a really, good performance, obviously. Next up, we got Cam Thomas for the Nets, who's scored 30-plus points in each game this season. I don't think he's going to keep that up, obviously, but for now, I think he's third in the league in points per game right now, so obviously that's something. Next up, we got Chet Holmgren having his 7-block game, breaking the rookie record for the Thunder, so that's good, obviously. Also for the Thunder, we got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He had a 34-point, 11 rebound, and 5 steal game, really good. The Cavs, Donovan Mitchell put up 43 points in a game. The Mavericks, Luka Doncic has gone off in every single game. One game he had 49 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists. Obviously, a near triple-double with 49 points is an amazing game. Then he had a 35-point, 12 assists, 12 rebound triple-double there. So 30-point triple-double, good game, obviously. 33-point, 13 rebound, 10 assist game, another 30-point triple-double. So Luka has either had a near 50-point game or a 30-plus point triple-double in each of his first 3 games. So I think he's currently the MVP of the league right now. If the season were to end after a week, Luka's MVP. But, obviously I don't think he's going to keep up with these insane numbers, but he definitely does have a very solid MVP chance this year. Next, we got Stephen Curry having a 41-point game and a 42-point game the same week. Obviously 2 40-point games in a week is pretty good. Then we got Zach LaVine, who's currently has the highest scoring game this season with a 51-point game. Obviously that's really good. Then we got Joel Embiid having a 35-point, 15 rebound, 6 block game. That's really good. And then DeJounte Murray for the Hawks with a 41-point, 7 rebound, 5 assist game. So far, with my math, we've had one 50-point game with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other 40-point games. And then, 2 30-point triple-doubles this year. So already some insane statistical performances this season. But yeah, that's all I have. Thank you for watching. Make sure to come back next week for an updated Power Rankings list.